Hello and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name's Hannah and I make a lot of content about anti-MLM, anti-scam. I now have a new series about influencers and influencer culture, social media, that kind of thing. All of my videos are commentary based, so I show you something and we discuss it. And for this series on my channel, MLM Horror Stories, these are the stories that people have had about MLM companies. Maybe they were in an MLM, maybe they've been pitched for an MLM, maybe their sister is super deep in one. Pretty much anything goes. Anybody who has an experience with this business model and the wild things that go on with it, they'll write out their story, they'll send it to me, and I pick a few to read for a video. And this is the 86th video in the series, so if you're really into these stories, they're great to listen to like podcasts, I've been told. I'll link my horror stories playlist here for you if you want to watch through those, but I have over 200 anti-MLM videos on my channel as well. And that's all the intro stuff I have for you. I have previewed these stories. There are some juicy ones, so let's get into it. This one says, "Hey Hannah, I'm an avid true crime consumer, which recently led me to stumble upon the anti-MLM community." Isn't that interesting? I think there is a big overlap between people who like anti-MLM and people who like true crime. Fascinating. And as soon as I finished watching one of your videos, I knew I had to share my story. If you do happen to share, please keep me anonymous due to personal details that I typically wouldn't share but are important to the story. Also ignore typos because I'm writing this on my phone. And as I'm reading your story ahead just a little bit, there is a trigger warning here for pregnancy loss. In 2019, I found myself pregnant again shortly after a traumatic pregnancy loss. Unfortunately, after finding out I was pregnant, we learned that this baby also had significant defects due to a chromosomal anomaly. My husband and I discussed termination as an option, but ultimately I couldn't do it, especially so recently after our loss. The decision to continue the pregnancy caused my husband to leave me and my other kids. And suddenly, I was a single mom, pregnant with a medically complex baby and unable to work due to the complicated pregnancy. Enter the Mary Kay hun. My God. Ugh, why do they have to insert themselves in the most inappropriate situations? Just let people be. Let people deal with their personal situations without being prospected for your MLM. Ugh! Makes me furious. Pause for a huge eye roll because so effing predictable, right? In her eyes, I'm sure I was the perfect victim. Oops, I meant client, but I digress. What was described to me as the perfect night of pampering for a newly single mama that I paid a babysitter $20 an hour for quickly turned into a sales pitch. While I admit that I liked the products, I really didn't have fun and it definitely wasn't the pampering I was excited for. I ended up leaving more exhausted than anything and feeling sick about the fact that I spent money on a babysitter and left my kids for this. Yet for some reason, when I received a call a few days later for another session of pampering just for me and my girls, I still found myself loading the kids up to again make the drive to her studio. Did I mention it was an hour drive? Because it was. Before we even started this session, the hun was already pushing a kit at me so I could see an example of how easy it is to start and how cheap it is to start making money. Again, eye roll. I explained how money was tight and I even got emotional as I told her about my current pregnancy and the baby's diagnosis. For a split second, I thought she would stop pressuring me after that, but nope. Her eyes freaking lit up with excitement and she started talking about how awful it would have to be to leave my other kids to go to work after I lose my pregnancy. She worded it as when, not if, but then proceeded to list all of the reasons it would be even better to have a Mary Kay business if my baby did happen to survive because she had a disabled niece who needed NICU time, and imagine all of the nurses I'll meet who can be my customers. I'm sorry, lady, but that is the least of our concerns right now, okay? We're not thinking about who we can pitch in the NICU. How dare you? That is not something we're thinking about. That's not something we're considering. That's not something we're looking forward to. I'm not sure where this story is going to end up in the lineup of stories in this video, but there was another story I read earlier today of an MLM rep making ridiculous assumptions about somebody and pitching it like, your life sucks so bad right now. Here's how my MLM opportunity can make it better. And it's the same exact situation of somebody in an MLM seeing somebody else as an opportunity to make money, and they're focused on that and they will victimize and prey on that person's insecurities. These stories come in all different forms, but the mindset is still the same. Oh man, look how down in the dumps you are. Let me insert myself. Goodness. I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm not. I packed up my girls who were disappointed to be leaving without their spa day that I hyped them up for, and I felt like a horrible mom. I also stayed up crying that night thinking about how ugly her words were about my unborn baby, who she only saw as a pawn in her sick game. Fast forward to a year later, I ran into this same hun in an elevator at the children's hospital. I excitedly told her that we were there for a checkup for my now healthy baby girl. But the hun didn't even recognize me or remember a single thing I had told her. I still get angry when I think about it to this day, and unfortunately I think it's something I'll feel resentful about for a while. I appreciate you sharing these stories because I'll admit, before I had my own, I would have thought that these stories were exaggerated. Unfortunately, a few other huns have tried to pitch my special needs daughter as an easy dollar sign. Even being told by one hun that, quote, people eat that up on social media. But I have found a louder voice due to that first encounter, and I have no issues telling people to F off at this point. Keep on being awesome. Good for you. I love to hear that. And what you're saying here about this Mary Kay hun in an elevator a year later not recognizing you, not having any idea who you are, not recalling her interaction with you is chilling, because that's something that deeply impacted you that was probably just another day for her. That has sat with you all this time. That has hurt you emotionally. And she likely doesn't even recall what she did. She doesn't even know how it's wrong. She doesn't know how it impacted you. And she probably doesn't even care. It's insulting to come in contact with somebody who you know how badly they've hurt you in the past and they couldn't care less. They don't even remember. It's not on their radar at all. I'm sure that makes you feel awful and you don't deserve that. And I apologize that she made you feel that way. What I am happy to hear is that it sounds like you've been able to stick up for yourself going forward. I'm so glad to hear that your baby is healthy. And I am so glad that you did not fall for it, right? I'm so glad that you didn't join Mary Kay in this really challenging time in your life, despite her greatest attempts to get you involved, I guess. Thank you for sending in your story. This one says, hello Hannah, congrats on the new baby. Enjoy every moment because they go so fast. My oldest is about to graduate from high school and I'm not sure where the time went. Please feel free to use my name. I have a few horror stories, most of which are similar to those we have all heard before. One in particular sticks out, and after watching your recent MLM Horror Stories video 75, I thought I could shed a little light on the Kirby vacuum reps training. Another Kirby story, I'm ready for it. There are so many Kirby stories, so please give me all your knowledge, shed some light on what is going on with this company. No, I was never a Kirby rep, but I had the occasion to see behind the curtain, if you will, and it was eye-opening. This happened years ago when my oldest was only a couple of years old. We were renting a house and there was a knock at the door. Cue dramatic background music indicating the eventual loss of hours of my life. In this particular case, I was offered a free carpet cleaning in one room of my house. With a small child and white carpets, I was absolutely interested in getting a free clean carpet. The only catch was that my husband needed to be home. So we scheduled the time a few hours later when he would be home. That is intriguing to me. This is the first story I think where the Kirby rep is like, oh, your husband has to be home. Why? I mean, I would want my husband home for backup, right? But I think this is the first time I'm hearing that was a requirement of the Kirby rep to get your carpet cleaned. We've had many other stories of young women alone in the house stuck with a Kirby rep, so that's not a requirement for all of them. Anyway, back to your story. Fast forward, my husband is home and they arrived promptly to clean our carpet. Only instead of a professional carpet cleaning apparatus, they haul in a Kirby vacuum with a carpet cleaning attachment. To say I was confused was an understatement. And then cue hours of sales pitch, literal hours. I don't remember all of the details. I know they vacuumed our mattress to show us how powerful it was and all the dirt and dust that it accumulates. They cleaned a small section of carpet, not a whole room as promised, using the cleaning attachment to show us how easy it was. They talked about all the benefits, how they were running a promotion, and that we could help our sales rep win a trip to Vegas. I'll pause here for a second. Apparently our sales rep, there were two in this case, was new, and this was his first week on the job. This was why they came as a pair, so that the experienced rep could help the new guy. But it also meant double the pressure and they would each follow one of us around. At this point, it's evening. We've eaten, my small child is fussy, and we cannot get rid of them. Back to the main story. Something that you've heard before and happened to us is at some point in the pitch, they take our vacuum, telling us a line about how they'll trade it in for a discount and we'll get so much from our new Kirby. Then they set it outside the front door. I promise this is important. Well, my husband cracks. He wants the vacuum. He's obsessed. So we sit down and talk about the price. Over $3,000. Yes, you heard that right. Over $3,000 in the early 2000s. reasons. But hey, they provide financing. Ugh, so yes, we bought the damn thing with 3% interest. Don't worry too much though, my state was looking out for us better than I was. Thankfully, in Washington, where we lived at the time, there's a 3-day buyer's remorse law, which the Kirby guys were required to tell us about. It gave us 3 days to return for a full refund and no fault large ticket items. All we had to do was take it to them. To say that I was almost instantly remorseful is an understatement. Nearly as soon as they left, taking my old vacuum with them, I wanted out. My husband still wanted the Kirby, but I was not to be swayed. I called them the following day to see what I needed to do to get out of the contract, return the Kirby, and get my old vacuum back. Turns out I needed to drive over 60 miles to their office in Kent, bringing everything with me. I also had to listen to a guilt trip about how the new sales guy would lose his trip to Vegas, etc., etc. I told the guy that his trip was not worth my $3,000 and that I was on my way. We grabbed everything and headed up to get our vacuum back and void the contract. We walked into an office space that had tons of old vacuums lined up. They had to keep them for at least the 3-day buyer's remorse window. Yes, there were at least 24 other people that had recently bought a Kirby vacuum based on the number of old non-Kirby vacuums sitting in the office. Again, with the pressure to keep the Kirby, but I was firm. Fortunately, I can be stubborn when necessary. While we were waiting for the paperwork to cancel our contract, I could hear a class being held inside a large conference room that was also in the office. There were at least a dozen young men and women inside. Hannah, it was word for word the sales pitch I had just had given to me in my house. A literal script of what and how to pitch, right up to the guy teaching the class picking up an old vacuum, walking it to the conference room door, setting it outside, saying the exact words my sales rep had used, and closing the door behind him. It was like I was watching an actor's masterclass on how to act a scene from Kirby, The Life of a Salesman. So your assessment that they must teach these things is more spot on than you even knew. They have it down to a literal science of what and how to say to play on people's emotions, wear them down, and get a sale. Needless to say, I got my voided contract, my old vacuum, and I got the heck out of there. My husband was still obsessed with Kirby vacuums, but you know there is a thriving market of used and refurbished ones. He actually picked one up at Goodwill for $30 a few years later. Thanks for reading my story. I hope it sheds some light on the underbelly of Kirby's sales. Give the kitties my love and a few pets, snuggle your precious baby, and enjoy every moment. Wow, I love this so much. Like I said at the beginning, we get so many Kirby stories on here, and I like to include them because they're all just outlandish. They're all completely crazy, and a lot of them have these similarities of these guys forcing their way into your house and they refuse to leave, and they're taking your vacuum with them and that kind of stuff. Like, I've absolutely speculated in previous videos, this has to be something they train on, because why else would this be appearing in so many other stories from across the country? And I love it so much that I have some confirmation on this now. These Kirby salespeople are trained to act this way, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, don't let them into your house. For the love of God, whatever you do not let them cross the threshold, because if they do, they know how to manipulate you. They know how to intimidate you. And like you said, play on people's emotions, wear them down. I don't care if it's rude, shut the door in their face. They might put their foot in the door. That's been in a story previously. Here's my final statement when it comes to Kirby reps. Don't let them in, shut the door in their face, call the police if necessary. I've gotten confirmation in other videos that it is common for police to get calls about Kirby reps all the time. They're so aggressive and abrasive. Do what you gotta do to protect yourself. Don't fall for this $3,000 vacuum. Thank goodness you got your vacuum back. I respect that so much, that you drove to Kent to get it back, to void the contract. Like, you put in the work that they were hoping you wouldn't bother doing. But I love that you listened to your gut and you did what you knew was right. Thank you so much for sending in this Kirby story. Now, for this next story, I never usually preface these with anything, but this one is kind of a special case. This story is one that I've debated reading for a while, and it's also something that the writer had debated sending for a while, and that's because it discusses the connection between LDS missions and MLM business practices, which is kind of a heated topic because it discusses religion, which is not a topic we typically touch on in my videos. If you're not sure what an LDS mission is or what it entails, don't worry, that's what the bulk of this next story is going to be dedicated to explaining. But the reason I kind of feel hesitant to include it is because I'm not LDS myself, but I do have a lot of personal friends and family members that are members of the church. And while I don't share the same beliefs as them, I do still love them dearly, obviously. So in the interest of not ruffling any feathers with my personal relationships, I'm not going to be providing my own commentary for this next story. I'm just going to read it as written and let you formulate your own conclusions about it. I absolutely recognize the overlap between members of the LDS church and their involvement with MLM companies. If you have a Venn diagram like that that middle section is pretty hefty. I have plenty of my own opinions on this topic, as I'm sure you can deduce for yourself, but it's just not something I'm willing to touch on in my videos because those personal relationships do take priority for me. But I think it's a fascinating connection to show nonetheless. So this next story comes from somebody who served her own mission, and she's sharing her firsthand experiences and observations, and I think she does a great job explaining the overlap between LDS and MLM. So I'm gonna read it so you can hear it from her words without adding in too much of my own thoughts, and I hope that you can respect that. So this story says, "Hi Hannah, I've debated sending in this story for over a year, but finally felt like it was worth sending in. I'm not sure what compelled me to write this now, but here we go." My story is different in the sense that it doesn't revolve around a specific MLM company, but just stick with me. This story took place when I was serving an LDS mission in 2019. In order to understand this story, I feel like I need to provide some context of what an LDS mission entails. LDS is an acronym or nickname for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, used to be referred to as Mormons. I'm sure you've seen LDS missionaries knocking on doors or have at least heard about them through the Book of Mormon musical, but the mission experience itself is definitely strange. Young men and women are eligible to volunteer to go on missions starting at 18 for men and age 19 for women. Men are expected to serve for 2 full years and women are expected to serve for 18 full months. Each prospective missionary goes through a long process of interviews with church leaders at different levels of authority to determine if they have lived by the church's standards and are worthy to serve a mission. I have my own thoughts on this, but I'll forgo my commentary for the sake of time. Once all of the paperwork is finished and a series of middle-aged men have deemed you pure and worthy to serve, you essentially send an application to the church's headquarters in Salt Lake City, Utah, where the highest-ranking elders of the church prayerfully consider where you will be assigned to serve. There is virtually no way to request a certain area of the world, and it's just based on inspiration. Once they determine where you will go, they send you a letter informing you of where you're going to serve, what day you will begin your mission, and what language you will be asked to speak. There are missionary training centers, MTCs, in several locations around the world where LDS missionaries go to learn how to preach the gospel and learn the language they have been assigned to speak if it's not in their native language. I was called to speak English, my first language, so I was only in the MTC for 2.5 weeks before I was sent to my mission area. It doesn't really matter where the story took place, but it was somewhere in Texas. One of the main rules, if not the most important rule, is that as a missionary, you are never allowed to be alone. Throughout your service as a missionary, you are assigned various companions of your same sex who you, again, have no say in choosing. Let me clarify that these companions are absolutely not sexual partners or like life companions, but sometimes they do fall in love, and I always cheer on my fellow gays. Anyways, you have to always be within sight and sound of your companion, meaning if your companion cannot see and or hear you, then you are breaking the rules. The only exceptions are for showering, using the bathroom, and certain clinical scenarios like therapy or surgery. Okay, so more on the rules. Every missionary has to pay a certain amount of money each month in order to cover their living expenses. Because you can't decide where you go, the church asks every missionary to pay the same amount. When I went, it was about $475 a month, but I know it's significantly more now. Every missionary is given a debit card from the church and gets a monthly spending allowance for groceries, clothes, toiletries, etc., and is encouraged to only spend the money they give you. We received $150 a month, so the remaining $325 was supposed to cover our rent, gas, etc. Personally, I require a lot more than $150 for my personal expenses, but I digress. Wait, so $150 a month for groceries alone is like not that much money, but then you're also supposed to be using that money for toiletries and stuff? Like that really doesn't seem like enough. Sorry, I know I'm not supposed to be giving my 2 cents here, but I also require more than $150 a month for my personal expenses to live, so that's crazy. You might be wondering why this is relevant, but I'm trying to help people understand the complete lack of freedom people experience as missionaries. It is an extremely highly controlled environment that falls right into the qualifications of the BITE model. If you're not familiar with what the BITE model is, I always like to call it the checklist for cults. I can link it below if you'd like more information on that. All missionaries are supposed to be aware of the rules before they go, and they agree to obey them as part of their service. These rules include waking up every day at 6:30 a.m., no exceptions, and being in bed every day at 10:30 p.m., again, no exceptions. 1 hour of personal gospel study daily, 30 minutes of daily exercise except on Sundays, 1 hour of gospel study with your assigned companion daily, being outside actively preaching the gospel every day from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., no exceptions for holidays, no contact with anyone at home unless it's preparation day, and at that time you were only allowed to send emails to your family and close friends. We weren't allowed to call home unless it was Mother's Day or Christmas, and we only got 30 minutes. You can't have your own phone. You have one from the church that has privacy software on it that blocks access to virtually every website except the church's website and Facebook. Some missionaries now have Instagram, but that wasn't the case for me. Dress code. As a woman, I was required to wear a dress or skirt every day that covered my knees and was completely modest, meaning it couldn't be too low cut and absolutely could not show your shoulders. Oh, and don't forget the classic black name tag, which leads me to my next point. You're not allowed to use your first name at any time, and no one is allowed to call you by your first name. Everyone has to be addressed as elder last name for men or sister last name for women. There's a ton of rules, and I won't list them all out, but basically your entire identity is stripped away from you, and every day you're expected to go out and teach as many people as possible about the church and its teachings, so that they will eventually get baptized and become members of the church. Kind of like recruitment, you say? Each week, companionships set goals for how many new people they want to find, how many new people they want to come to church, how many people they want to set a baptism date with, and so on. Then you're expected to go out and work as hard as you can to fulfill those quotas. I'm sure by now you're starting to see the MLM parallels, but we are far from the end. As missionaries, you're always brainstorming new ways to find new people to teach. We were expected to always have proselyting materials on hand to give out to people. This included physical copies of the Book of Mormon, pamphlets about our teachings, and pictures of Jesus with our contact info written on the back, as well as the address for our local church building. We would give these cards to people in restaurants, libraries, grocery stores, public restrooms. Yes, we were asked to contact people in restrooms, and most famously by going door to door and trying to find anyone who was interested in listening to two 19-year-old girls talk about Jesus. I was even told to pull our car over to hand them to pedestrians and cyclists. Yes, it was very socially dangerous, and no one cared about that. We were told that if you were obedient to the rules, then God would protect us no matter what. The mission experience lends itself very nicely to groupthink and borderline brainwashing. You are taught to doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. You're asked to tell your mission leaders if you're struggling with certain church teachings so that they can help you understand the truth of them. You're told that if you aren't having success in baptizing people, then you just need to try harder and be more obedient and sacrifice more to show God how much you care about bringing His children back to the fold. Oh, and you're absolutely not allowed to leave the church or the mission boundaries. And I know I said I wasn't going to insert my own commentary, but I just want to highlight what you're saying here about people's shortcomings or how they're struggling to find new people to join the church. Those things are blamed on them, and it's their fault. They just need to try harder. They just need to work harder. They just need to believe more. That is a direct parallel to how people operate in MLMs. If you're not making money, if you can't find new recruits, it's all your fault and you need to fix it. Each mission is divided up into zones. Those zones are divided into districts, and those districts are divided into areas. You and your companion are assigned to an area, and you are the only missionaries in said area. Depending on where you are, that could be a 5-mile radius or a 50-mile radius. You simply never know. Regardless of the size of your area, you're never supposed to leave it without explicit permission from the mission president, who's just another middle-aged man who's been given authority by the church to determine what missionaries are and are not allowed to do within the mission he presides over. It's all very convoluted, but again, extremely controlled. Okay, so back to the fulfilling quotas thing. We would have weekly meetings with the other companionships in our district to go over our numbers and brainstorm ways to find and teach people more effectively. We would also have zone conferences every 6 weeks where we would be flooded with powerful, emotional, spiritual messages that were supposed to motivate us to go out and find more people to join the church. Additionally, these meetings were for, you guessed it, being filled with more ideas of how to find people. And then about twice a year, we would have a mission conference where all of the missionaries in our assigned mission would meet together, and one of the highest ranking elders from the church would come and teach us, yes, you're right, ways to find more people to teach the gospel so that they would get baptized and become members of the church. Let me also add now that one of the requirements to be a member of the church is to give 10% of your income to the church as tithing. So if we look beyond the facade of the majesty and wonder of the religion itself, we were just a bunch of brainwashed 18 to 20-year-old kids who were recruiting people to join a church that required them to give 10% of their income back to the church. It may seem like I'm trying to convince you that the entire LDS church is an MLM, but somehow we're just now getting to the part of the story that I actually started this email to tell you. At one of these mission conferences, a very high up leader was teaching us a brand new way to find people to teach. He told us that we should start asking people if we could pray for them and their loved ones by name. So instead of trying to teach them one of the 5 required lessons that we were trained to know perfectly, perfectly, yes, I forgot about that part, we could just ask them if we could pray for them. Then, once we left the person's house or walked away from them in the Walmart parking lot or wherever we were supposed to write down the person's name, the people they asked us to pray for, and any specific details we got from them. Then we were supposed to get in touch with them again within a week and follow up to see if our prayers had been helping them or their loved ones. If they said yes, then we asked if they thought that their loved ones would want to meet with us. We were told to get about 10 names to pray for per person, so that eventually some of those 10 names would become people being taught, and they would give us 10 more names, and those people would give us 10 more names. As he was giving us this training, he drew it out on a whiteboard, and this man, dead ass, drew the structure of a pyramid scheme in front of 200 plus missionaries, and no one batted an eye. We were mesmerized. I'm not going to tell you the actual last name of the person, we'll just call him Elder Thompson, and he called this technique the Thompson Triangle. He really walked up there with 100% confidence and pretended that he invented the concept of a pyramid scheme based on the inspiration of God, and we all believed him. For the next 6 months, we were asked nearly every week to share our miracles with the rest of the missionaries about how the Thompson Triangle was working for us. This whole scenario makes me nauseous just thinking about it. Not to mention, we were explicitly told to target vulnerable people who could benefit from coming closer to Christ. For example, someone who just suffered the loss of a loved one, someone who recently lost their job, someone who is struggling with addiction, and most importantly, families. Because what's better than one person becoming a member, an entire family becoming members of the church? Needless to say, I wish that I had found anti-MLM content before I served a mission, because the alarm bells would have been ringing loud and clear. I know that things are slightly better now, but they've been recruiting people to join the church this way since the 1800s, and I don't think they plan to stop until Jesus himself comes back to earth. I know this wasn't like your usual stories, but I hope at least one person hears this and realizes the psychological damage that comes from being in a highly controlled environment like that. Godspeed to anyone who heard this story and is about to go down the rabbit hole of learning more about LDS missions, because it only gets crazier. Thank you again for reading my very long submission, and thank you for making the content that you do. If you happen to feature this story, I would love to know which episode you put it in so I can be sure to watch and share. You got it. I'll send you an email right after I'm done filming. As I said at the beginning of this story, I'm not going to be inserting any of my own thoughts, but what I want to do is just reiterate some of the connections here. We have the encouragement to recruit people. There's this notion that if things aren't working out for you, that it's your own fault and it's something you need to deal with and fix. It sounds like those who join LDS missions and those who are part of an MLM company are both encouraged to not really question things and have a certain level of belief and trust and faith that if you just do what you're told to do, that good things will come to you. I also think it's worth pointing out that there is some amount of money that you have to pay to remain a member of these two groups. 10% of your income goes to the LDS church if you're a member, in the same way that you're spending your own money in the form of annual fees or required purchases to keep your ranks and stay in the MLM company. There's another similarity as far as your contact with outside people. During your involvement within both of these groups, a lot of your social energy goes towards building relationships with other people in your group or building relationships with outside people that you're trying to get into the group. It also seems like there's these regular trainings that go on where you gather everybody in the organization together and you teach them how to recruit more people. In the case of this LDS mission you're talking about, in the form of literally drawing a pyramid scheme on a whiteboard. That family tree of finding 10 people who find 10 people who find 10 people looks exactly like MLM compensation plans. So as you can see, there is an extreme level of overlap between the LDS church and LDS missions and MLM business opportunities. And I think your story really helps us understand how people that are a part of this church organization might be more primed to get involved with an MLM, because there are so many similarities in their religion, which is perhaps something they've grown up with. It's just a part of their life. It's just who they are. They don't really question it that much. And then you have this business opportunity that looks remarkably similar to this organization they've been involved in. So it's a really easy transition. The LDS to MLM pipeline, basically. I am so thankful for your story because of your firsthand account, your firsthand experiences, how much detail you put into it. It illustrates beautifully this connection that I have been too worried to talk about, quite frankly, because I don't want any of my personal family members or relationships to suffer or those people to feel attacked because I am talking about it in this way. So I greatly appreciate having a story from somebody who was in it, who experienced it, and who can outline all of those connections for us. Thank you so much. This story says, "Hi Hannah, hope you and your family are doing great. If you decide to read out my story, please note that it contains some references to fat phobia and self-destruction. Thank you for your incredible work. You can call me Katya. It will keep me anonymous as it's not my actual name and will hopefully be easy to pronounce. I've only recently found your channel and have been capital H hooked on your anti-MLM playlist ever since. Many people have probably already told you this, but your manner of narration is both engaging and soothing, wonderful accompaniment and distraction during various otherwise terribly boring tasks around the house. Your videos might probably be a great listening exercise for students of English as a foreign language as well, because you enunciate everything very clearly and are so eloquent." Thank you for saying that. It's funny, I actually have been told that my videos have been used in ESL classes before. Anyway, that was my professional bias peeking through because I translate and teach English for a living, more to the point. I am from Russia and most foreign companies no longer work in my country, but back when they did, certain MLMs that may be familiar to you did have some foothold here. When I was a kid, my friend's mom briefly went around trying to sell Avon to support her income as a teacher, but quickly stopped. And when I just started out working in my field, I would often be asked to translate text that sang praises to the miracle properties of Amway's concentrated detergents. Back then, it was nothing out of the ordinary to me, as it's normal for a translator to work with pitches for products that a foreign business wants to sell in their country. But now I know better, and I even feel a little guilty about playing a part in extending a pyramid scheme's reach across borders. On the upside, your videos have actually inspired me to try and do some research on whether any international MLMs are still here in Russia, and whether we have any of our own homegrown ones, aside from the incredibly infamous MLM company from the 90s. But that one did machinations with stocks rather than sell overpriced food supplements or beauty kits. This, however, is not what my horror story is about. Like quite a few of your other viewers, I suddenly felt a memory resurface when you talked about how MLM Huns prey on people with body image issues. Now, I am fat and have always been. My size has fluctuated somewhat throughout my life, but even at my smallest, I will still have a soft tummy and big jiggly thighs. It has taken me a lot of mental effort to accept that that's just how I am, and there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy delicious veggie dishes and fresh fruit juices. I very rarely drink alcohol, and I love swimming, riding a bike, and going on long walks. And if there's a panoramic tourist attraction that requires you climbing a flight of stairs to enjoy a pretty view, I'll be the first in line for it. But I refuse to torture my body, the only body I'll ever have in this life, with starvation diets and more exercise than is physically sustainable for me. A bit ago, when I was maybe 19 or 20 and just recovering from teen bullying trauma and learning to love my body the way it is, I was visiting some friends in St. Petersburg, which is this huge city that used to be the Russian capital from the 18th century and up to the Communist Revolution. Lots of history, as you can imagine. I was crossing a bridge in the historical center and just stopped in the middle of it to take it all in, maybe pull out my camera to snap a few photos. But before I knew it, a middle-aged woman walked up to me with the fakest smile of sympathy plastered across her face and drawled something along the lines of, "Oh honey, I understand how you're feeling right now, but I can help." Taken aback, I looked away from the stunning old city vista and just gaped at her, while my mind was going a mile a minute. Is she trying to offer me some kind of cult brochure? Am I about to be brainwashed? Is this the stranger danger my mother warned me about? How do I escape? Meanwhile, she kept on cooing. "Taking care of your body is such a struggle, but my company offers great supplements that can get your weight under control. Just a single tea bag-sized pack of powder easily dissolves in water and sits in your stomach like a full meal. You'll start losing weight without feeling hungry all the time, and your energy and mood will improve too, so there's no need for these sad thoughts, okay? You will get to enjoy life again, and if you are a student, you can even offer these incredible products to your classmates and earn a bit of money on the side. How amazing is that?" And then it clicked for me. This woman had spotted a young girl standing all on her own in the middle of a bridge, staring out at the water, and seeing that the girl was fat, she had assumed, "Oh, this wretched thing is suffering so much because of her body image issues. She must want to jump." So instead of alerting emergency services about a person in crisis, or at least helping her like a normal human being, let me roll up to her and start peddling my miracle powders. I'm usually quite polite and anxious in social situations, but I was so flabbergasted that I blurted out very loudly and aggressively, "What are you on about? I'm not sad about my life. I'm just looking at the view. What did you think I was doing?" Having that question tossed at her like that must have really disoriented her, because she awkwardly shoved some kind of catalog into my hands and skedaddled in the direction of a popular scenic embankment that is usually lined with souvenir sellers and street performers dressed as old-timey Russian tsars, who can pose with you for a photo for a little fee. I'm now wondering if she intended to hound passersby in that tourist hotspot. The encounter may not have amounted to much, but ever since I remembered it it once again, I've been haunted by the implications. It was very fortunate that I did not have any of this self-destructive ideation that the Hun assumed I'd had, so I could yell at her and then have a laugh about it with the friends I was visiting. But what if there was some other girl in my place, a girl that had not yet overcome the external and internal fat phobia, and really felt like life in this body was not worth living the way I did at about 15 when the bullying was at its worst? I shudder to think about how the conversation would have gone for this hypothetical girl who would be in a genuine need for a compassionate good Samaritan to talk her away from the brink, and would instead face a callous sales rep only interested in preying on her insecurities for monetary gain. This predatory undercurrent is what makes the experience an MLM horror story to me, even if I myself got off very easy. This turned out quite wordy with my English major degree really showing, but thank you for opening your inbox regardless. I will now go and sit on the memory like the "this is fine" puppy for a while. Wishing you all the best and looking forward to your new videos, especially if there are kitty cameos. I agree with you that this is a really haunting thing to think about in retrospect. It's very disturbing if you think about it, because as we know, people who are in MLM companies are always on the hunt for a new opportunity. They're always scanning the crowd or trying to find some kind of sales opportunity in any situation they get themselves into. But your story is kind of revealing how that might turn into people making unjust assumptions and drawing their own conclusions about a person and their lifestyle and the way they feel about themselves, all based on the way they look. This has come up in previous stories before where MLM reps will approach someone and be like, "Hey, it looks like you need to lose weight. I have a supplement for you." Not a super effective sales strategy in my opinion, but your story takes it a step way, way further where she's like, "Oh, this girl over here must be feeling this particular way about her body and it must be drawing her to do this drastic thing." And she's created this whole scenario about you in her head that's completely made up based on her own biases and her own interpretation of the situation. And embarrassingly for her, she completely misread the situation and you were like, "What is wrong with you? I'm totally fine. I love myself. I'm happy with myself. I'm just enjoying the view. Can you please leave me alone?" Good for you for saying something like that and for not just kind of backing down and like awkward laughing about it like I probably would have, because confrontation makes me very uncomfortable in social situations. But because you were so blunt and you immediately questioned her intentions and questioned her assumptions about you, I would hope that that would impact her on a deep level and that she would change her behavior going forward, because this kind of thing is completely rude and inappropriate, and I'm hoping that you kind of checked her behavior enough for her to reconsider doing something like this to somebody in the future. I'll apologize on her behalf that she did this to you, but what I hope everybody can take away from this story is the understanding that a lot of times when people join these MLM companies, their brains are rewired in such a way that they're just not looking at things as reality. They are making up situations in their head. They are looking for a sales opportunity everywhere they go. They're just not viewing the world through the same lens that somebody not in an MLM would view it. And it doesn't excuse the behavior whatsoever, but I hope that it gives a little bit more understanding as to why people act that way. I'm also glad that it wasn't a different person in this situation who was actually struggling, and I'm glad that you stood up for yourself and really set the record straight for her. Your story is a prime example of how people in MLMs will take advantage of other people's insecurities and vulnerabilities, even the insecurities and vulnerabilities that are completely made up in their own head. This story says, "Hello, I'm submitting this because watching your videos has brought up an old memory I forgot about. When I was about 10 or 11, my grandma had taken me to the art fair she was working at. While there, I was given $5 to walk around, look at the crafts, and pick one to buy for myself. As I was walking down the path looking at the booths, an older woman waved me over, a child who was clearly unsupervised. It was a small town and my grandma knew everyone, plus it was a different time. And she started showing me Younique mascara, the gross fibers one. I was way too young to wear mascara and was not allowed to, so I was excited and intrigued to get my hands on some. I fully expected to buy this one mascara, but it was over $20. I told the lady I didn't have enough and she immediately started pressuring me to ask my parents for more money. I felt uncomfortable, but I was unaware of why she was being so pushy. She kept explaining that all of my classmates would make fun of me if I started the school year, this was Labor Day, without having my own mascara. She told me she wore it at my age and that all of my classmates will be wearing mascara and that I could have a, quote, designer mascara. Then I explained to her that I was with my grandma and she was working her own booth, so I couldn't go bother her and ask for more. She then leans in and quietly instructs me to just take a 20 out of her purse. I genuinely wanted to fit in when I was going into the 5th grade. As ashamed as I am to admit this, I did. I stole from my grandma and got this stupid mascara. And I felt so guilty about it until I eventually forgot about it. My grandma passed away this year. I still feel bad for stealing from her and lying about it. But watching your video reminded me of this, and it's so gross that this hunbot legit preyed on a child's insecurities and told me to steal. I might even go as far to say that the hunbot is worse than me, and I stole. And that's where your story ends. And wow, I don't think I've heard of another instance of an adult woman encouraging a child to steal something so that she can make a commission on mascara. That is so sneaky, dirty, dishonest, unwarranted. Who asks a child to steal from their grandma so that she can sell a mascara to the child? Like, who does that? Apparently this woman who's trying to sell Younique makeup. Like, are you that desperate? Are you really struggling that much to sell these cosmetics that you're encouraging a literal child to steal? What kind of lesson is that teaching the child? Is the guilt that that kid is now gonna feel worth the $5 commission to you, or however much you get? Dollars. We're not talking about like $100 commission here. We're talking about $4 or $5 probably. That's just greedy. That's unethical. That's immoral. And it reeks of desperation. And I agree with you that, yeah, you're the one that actually did the act of stealing, but she's the one that convinced you to do that, and somehow that's worse. I appreciate you sending in this more lighthearted story. And with that, my friends, it's all the MLM horror stories I have for you for this video today. I'm always looking for more submissions, so if you have your own MLM horror story you'd like to have considered for a video, the instructions for how to send that to me are in the description box below. Very, very simple. You just send me an email. And if you love this horror story series, there's now 86 of them in the playlist, so you can find that playlist on my channel to binge through those. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in my next one real soon.